Welcome to Startup Passport by Econsulate, and today we are here at the AI Asia Summit organized by SLASSCOM Sri Lanka. We're joined by Krishan Senevirathne, who is a head of engineering at Cut+Dry. Thank you very much for joining with us, Krishan. I think it's your first podcast experience that you mentioned, so we are glad to host you in your first. Krishan, could you tell us a bit more about your role as the head of engineering at Cut+Dry, and especially in terms of developing AI products and in their life cycle?
Yes, so I'll first explain what Cut+Dry is, a brief 30 seconds description. So Cut+Dry is a startup. It's a US based startup. Our vision is bringing farm to the kitchen, and as most of you might know, in the US, like 40% of all food produced is wasted. So the Cut+Dry was started as a means of fixing that problem, and we understand fixing those types of problems mean you need to have a proper data foundation, because you can only solve some of these problems by having adequate measures and having proper data. So we started this around 4 years ago, and I joined Cut+Dry roughly 3.5 years ago. Being a startup, you play many roles. Head of engineering is just one. I'm responsible, as part of head of engineering role, I'm responsible for the overall tech strategy in the organization, as well as talent. How do you bring in talent, and how do you make sure your tech stack is evolved based on the latest and greatest things happening in the industry, along with some of these AI initiatives. Around 2 years back, we started a lot of AI initiatives because we understood, as I said earlier, we needed data. So the first few years of this company, we were building the product to bring in the necessary data. We wanted the industrial flywheel running, so that our stakeholders, being the manufacturers, the distributor partners, as well as their customers, we wanted to bring these stakeholders into our ecosystem so that we can build our data foundation. Now we have a good enough set of data that we think can be used to have better AI products, better productionalize some of those use cases, which can add a lot of value.
Right. I think you've answered some of my some points from my next question as well. My next question is, what are the critical points that we need to address in bringing a POC all the way up to a full production? In your engineering journey and your framework that you laid out in Cut+Dry, how does this work?
So yeah, first of all, you can do as many POCs as you like. Doesn't mean all of them will go into production. There are obvious problems where sometimes some problems are identified at the POC stage, but doesn't mean all the problems are identified. So we need to understand, especially, I think your question is related to AI, especially related to AI projects. We need to understand it can fail at any point. So one example is, you are training your models with a limited set of data when you do the POC, and you are using a model that is optimized for that limited amount of data. Doesn't mean when you go into production with the full data set, and some of them will include biases, and then obviously you will see model drift. So that is one problem I think we faced. Now bringing a POC into production, now as I said, we can do a lot of POCs to determine how many use cases that we have ideated are viable. And based on the POCs, then I think you need to determine what are you going to prioritize. That is a very important step in this journey, especially for companies which want to build a culture around artificial intelligence. Because some of the first projects that you do matters a lot for your stakeholders. So if you try to productionalize a use case which is a lot more strategic, that means the effort is high. So you might not go into production anytime soon. So you need to make sure, especially at the start, we start with some of these low-hanging fruits. Less effort, but more value. With that, I think you can show a lot of progress to your stakeholders, and then bringing in a lot of value to your organization. To get a system from POC to a production, there are a lot of steps involved. Obviously there are a lot of technical challenges. You have to train the models with a lot of data, and then obviously you need to build your data pipeline. Otherwise, if there is no feedback loop, especially when you move something to production, if you don't have the feedback loop set up, then obviously at some point your model is going to be inaccurate. So you need to have that proper data foundation, and then your ML ops, how mature you are when it comes to your operationalizing these ML models and the data pipeline. So that is all about ML ops. You need to have a strong foundation there. And then most obviously you need to build a culture around AI. Otherwise you can do, as I said earlier, you can do a lot of POCs. But if you don't have a culture around innovation, culture around experimentation in the company, within people, within the leadership of the company, most of these AI POCs are going to fail.
And you mentioned an important point about the culture, and then having that innovation mindset within the team. And I want to touch a bit on the tech, and then the evolving speed of the tech. Like, it evolves exponentially every year, and then the speed of the next tech available at your disposal is getting smaller and smaller. How do you navigate this drastic change in the tech space, especially with the next best technology available? You don't even know whether the next best technology is available tomorrow. So what sort of challenge that poses you on your development?
All right, I think now, as you said, we can't predict what's going to happen tomorrow, especially in this AI space, because it's growing at a very rapid phase. So what we do today might be obsolete next week. You might have better models. So what we as a company in our strategy have decided is, whatever we do, sometimes this is not always possible, but most of the time and wherever possible, we are trying to make sure we can switch, especially around what versions of models you are using, especially around LLM use cases.
Right.
So we are creating this middle layer. It's around both cost as well as this problem that you mentioned, like AI is evolving, and tomorrow you might have a different, better model. So we are building, always we have the product, you have this middle layer where you can switch, like let's say pluggable components, right? Like pluggable models and pluggable APIs for models. So that way, our biggest fear was like the cost.
Right.
If this particular model, which is a commercial model that we are using, if they increase their price to $10 per request or $5 per request, then there's no ROI from those projects. So we built it because of that, but now even for this problem of rapidly evolving tech space, I think we can use the same concept.
Right. And since you've answered a lot on the culture and then the innovation and the product life cycle, as well as the evolving tech issue, now all of these are seen as opportunities as well as challenges for some of the startups that are starting today. So since our podcast is mainly catered to the startup ecosystem, I would want a couple of your advices to the startup founders, especially the technical startup founders. How do they need to focus on their AI strategy at the start, at the very beginning, because you joined like 6 months after the company's launch? So what are your advices for technical founders as well as engineering managers and heads of engineering?
Right. So, okay, so that's a very important question. There are a lot of things. Obviously, if you are in the early stage of your startup and you just founded the company, I think having the right people at the right time is extremely important. And if you are building a new company in this AI era, and if your use cases are around AI, obviously you need to build a culture which supports AI, which go hand in hand with AI technology. So culture of experimentation, culture of innovation, and by having the right people at the right time, playing the right roles, uh, you can build that culture, and you can build the necessary building blocks for your organization around AI. And obviously those can be reused. For example, especially around generative AI. Now, how do you do RAG? How do you fine tune your models? What is the vector database you are going to use? You can have a standard set of patterns from the beginning, and you can use them or reuse them, considering them as like building blocks of any platform that you are going to build. Obviously some of those might be obsolete after some time. That is where that pluggability or the adaptability comes into the play.
All right. Thank you very much. That was Krishan Senevirathne. Thank you very much for being a part of this show. And that was a very enlightening conversation about how startups could form their strategy at the initial level if they are focused on AI and their product is focused on AI. And then we hope to hear more from you in the future. Thank you very much for joining with us today.
Thank you very much. The pleasure is mine.